My wife was driving. We had gotten married a few weeks earlier. Our relationship felt new and exciting again, just as it had felt when we just met 2 years earlier. It wasn't like I had fallen in love with her again. Rather, I had realised how much I was still in love with her. We were on our way to her parents for dinner. I sat next to her, going through some of the photos I had taken with my phone on our honeymoon. They made me smile. Although it was late in the year, a sunbeam managed to escape the clouds above and landed on my face. It gave me a warm feeling that spread from my skin to my heart. My wife looked at me, just for a second. "I love you." Darkness. I couldn't see anything. The warmth was gone and replaced with a humid coldness. The damp air smelt musty and earthy. I didn't understand. We weren't sitting anymore, but standing in the middle of a crowd. I turned around and reached for the people next to me, trying to get a hold of my wife. "Victoria?" I said. "Where are you?" "I'm here." I took her hand. It felt just as cold as the air. "Where are we?" she asked. "What happened?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know." The people around us spoke in languages I didn't understand, but their crying voices made it clear that they were just as lost as we were. Piercing through all the weeping, wailing, and whispering was the sound of a river. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, the black water of the river appeared in front of me. My wife looked at me, and even though I recognised her, it felt like I hadn't seen her in a long, long time. Her face was familiar, and yet unfamiliar at the same time. Something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was. A wooden boat, piloted by an unnaturally tall old man with an unkempt beard, arrived at the shore. He was wearing black, tarnished clothes, and he steered his craft using a long pole. Some people tried to go aboard, but were pushed away, and some who didn't even try were called up to him, and he received them with his left hand. When the boat was full, he pushed it out into the water with the pole again, and left. "What is going on?" my wife said. "I want to go home. I want my mom. I want my mom. I want my mom." "Relax," I said. "It's going to be all right." I didn't know what I was talking about. It didn't feel like my voice belonged to me. Rather, it felt like an echo coming from far, far away. We stood there for many hours, maybe days. It was hard to tell. And the old man on the boat kept coming back for more passengers. During this time, I never felt hunger or thirst, and although I kept breathing, smelling the moist in the air, it was as if I did it out of habit, rather than out of need. It took a long time before it was our turn to board the boat, but when it was, the old man reached out his hand toward us, as if he chose us specifically. We crossed the Black River and stepped ashore onto the other side of it, together with 30 other people. I held my wife's hand with a tight grip. She cried softly while whispering that she wanted her mother. My body trembled with fear. There were hundreds of people here as well. We all walked, without knowing where, next to a narrow channel of water. A scream erupted among the crowd. Something in the water was watching us as we wandered through these underground halls. It was a gruesome beast, towering above us, with 6 long snake-like necks supporting hideous heads with 4 eyes each. I pulled my wife to the side. She followed me, but seemed to be strangely unconcerned, as if she didn't even care about the monster staring down at us. After walking for hours, we came upon 3 enormous gates carved into the black bedrock, but only the first gate was open. The other 2 seemed to have been sealed off thousands of years ago. Next to the open gate stood an empty table with 3 chairs behind it, and on the ground lay a large chain shaped like a leash that branched into 3 separate collars. On the other side of the open gate, there was an enormous subterranean cave system that somehow also resembled endless fields of land. They were covered with strange, pale and transparent flowers that glowed like dim phantoms in the everlasting darkness. Millions, if not billions, of people wandered these underground fields. Black cliffs as sharp as glass stood tall all around us, surrounding us with their twisted shapes. "Where are we?" my wife asked. "What is this horrid place?" I don't know. It was as if I was talking in a dream, and yet I knew I was awake. "Where's Mom?" my wife said. We had no choice but to walk, being pushed on by the crowd behind us. A man, reduced to nothing more than his bones, stood on a rock. He was dressed in a white toga with a broad purple stripe on its border. He kept repeating the same words over and over again. "Nomen mihi est Marianos. Nomen mihi est Marianos. Nomen mihi est Marianos. Nomen mihi est Marianos." So many people, just mindlessly walking, but all sharing the same facial expression, one of misery. A faint collective weeping filled the otherwise silent underground fields. I refused to let go of my wife's hand, afraid I would lose her in the crowd and never find her again. I thought about our wedding day. I forced myself to think about it as a way to ground myself, and I felt that I had to force myself more and more to stay focused and not let my thoughts lose themselves in the crowd, just as my body had. I looked back at my wife. She met my gaze with her grey eyes. Weren't they supposed to be green? Her hair looked different too, but I couldn't say in what way. I felt tears running down my cheeks. I love her, I thought, as if I tried to convince someone. I saw her face in my mind, just as it had looked beneath her white wedding veil a few weeks earlier. I, David Johnson, take you, Victoria Silverman, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. I kept repeating it in my head. I needed to remember. If I didn't actively think about it, I feared it would slowly dissipate into nothingness. I love her, I love her, I love her. And yet, she was slipping further and further away in my mind. I wasn't about to let that happen. Your eyes are green, your eyes are green, your eyes are green. A group of children, all dressed in ancient clothes, ran past us. Their laughter echoed between the cliffs. A pale young man sat on the ground a few meters away. He had a black mohawk and was wearing combat boots, ripped jeans, held up by a studded belt, and a leather jacket with "Fuck You" painted on its back. He was lighting his Zippo by snapping his fingers over and over again, while staring at the white flame with a dead look in his eye. A bit further away, I saw the silhouettes of Buddhist monks meditating on one of the cliffs, forever frozen in their lotus positions. The moving crowd split up into different rivers of people. One of them went down a large valley. The huge crowd was circling something in the centre of it. "Let's check it out," I said to my wife. "Maybe there's a way out down there. Maybe that's why all of them are going there." She didn't respond. "Baby," I said, "we have to try. Don't you understand?" She followed me indifferently. It took a long time to reach the centre of the valley, not because of how far away it was, but because of how slowly everyone was moving. I felt a sting of hope when we arrived. Perhaps there would be some answers here. There weren't any answers as such. All there was to see was a skull on the ground. It moved its jaws as if it was trying to speak. Everyone circled it, solemnly and absent-mindedly at the same time. A crown of thorns lay upon the mumbling skull. All of this meant something to the people who had chosen this path, and yet they seemed to only barely recall why. My wife didn't seem to notice her surroundings. She followed behind me, but in such a way that I couldn't be sure if she would have continued to do so if I let go of her icy hand. I stopped at the foot of one of the cliffs. "Wait here, baby," I said. "Why?" she said. "Don't leave me." I was happy to hear those words. She hadn't forgotten me. I'll just climb up to get a better look. On top of the cliff, I saw that the fields stretched out all the way to the horizon. The people moved in patterns, circling different positions or moving into the distance. The ghostly flowers sparkled like a gloomy, starry sky. It didn't matter in what direction I looked. Everything was the same. There was no edge in sight. I returned to my wife to tell her what I had seen, but when I saw her, my words got stuck in my throat. She had gouged her eyes out, holding them in her hands. "I can still see," she whispered. No, Victoria, no." I was horrified. Not so much because of the gruesome sight, as of my own somewhat apathetic reaction to it. I thought about her face behind the veil. What colour were the eyes? We kept on walking. There was nothing else to do. Every time I looked back at my wife, she had pulled a piece of flesh from her body. She looked at the pieces with her empty eye sockets, as if she couldn't tell what they were for. I wanted to return to the gate, but there were too many people in the way, and I didn't remember where they were anyway. I stumbled on a crying toddler crawling on the ground. "We need to escape," I said. "There must be a way out of here." "I want my mom." "Where is she?" my wife said. "I'll take you back to her," I said. "I promise." I tried to hold her in my arms to comfort her. "I love you," I said, while crying. She looked at me, and although half her face was gone by now, I could still see the confusion in it when she said, Who are you? I want Mom. She let go of my hand, and like the wind, the crowd carried her away from me. I fell on my knees. Looking up, I yelled at the surface of the earth, "Don't take her away from me, please!" I kept imagining her face, constantly looking for her among what had once been people. I wasn't going to forget her. I wasn't going to give up. Not ever. I continued for days, for months and years. I yelled her name over and over again, but I never got an answer. And then, one day, someone approached me from behind and whispered into my ears. I felt a bright light shining behind me, even though I couldn't see it. It emanated a warmth I hadn't felt since that day when the sunlight had landed on my face. "Don't turn around, David." It was the voice of a young woman. Her breath against my neck made my skin come to life, making the hairs on it stand up from a bittersweet pleasure. She spoke in a language I didn't understand, and yet I somehow knew what she was saying. "I've been sent here from above. Your everlasting love, remembered so clearly even after wandering the underworld for years, has touched her righteous heart. Therefore she has instructed me to show you a way out." She told me there was an opening in the cliff ahead of me, and that, if I entered it, I would have to cross 6 rivers. "There are 2 things you have to remember," she said. "You must drink the water of the 4th river, and when you arrive at the last one, you must give this coin to the ferryman to be taken across." I felt something appear in my hand. It was a silver coin. After I had seen it, the woman was gone. I have no idea who she was, or where she came from. I have to squeeze myself into the opening in the cliff. My mind was foggy, just as it had been during all the years I had spent underground, and it was difficult to remember exactly what the woman had told me when she whispered her enchanted words into my ear. I spent all of my strength trying to remember my wife, and had no energy left to think about anything else. But for each river I crossed, my mind became somewhat clearer, and after I had given the coin to the man on the boat, I finally remembered what the woman had told me. Having crossed the 6th river, I thought back at what I had been told. You must drink the water of the 4th river. I hadn't done that. As I realised this, I woke up to voices around me. I saw my wife's green eyes staring at me. There was no life in them. A piece of metal had entered the left side of her head. A group of paramedics cut me out of the vehicle. Since then, I've been unable to forget the years I spent wandering those fields. The knowledge of my wife still being down there, endlessly searching for her mum, torment me every second of my life. Every time I close my eyes, I see my wife holding her own eyes in her hands, and I feel so much older than I actually am, out of touch with everything I once held dear. Somehow I know it's all because I forgot to do that one thing, drinking the water of the 4th river. I forgot. And now, I'm condemned to remember.